Really appreciate you taking the time. We know that with a whole host of things, pandemic included, your time is important and we appreciate you getting to share it with us. So by way of introduction, today's speakers are me. I'm Christopher Hariz. I'll be leading about half of the discussion. I'm the COO of Hex Metal Technology, and I'm joined here today with Sabina Serta, Construction Controller for Atlantic Health, and my partner and CTO, Utkarsh Shah, also with Hex Metal. So, kind of from the start, why are we here? And the short answer is there's been a real crackdown by the Joint Commission on emergency lighting in the last year. In fact, it's kind of rocketed up to be the 6th most common causes of deficiencies during inspections. And emergency lighting is often an afterthought. Lots of times it's considered to be not as critical or not as important as other ECs and is overlooked. And that's kind of led the Joint Commission to crack down on it a bit more. In particular, in the last year, a lot of battery-powered unit equipment has caused these deficiencies. And with an ongoing trend towards outpatient or offsite buildings, which the TJC has also signaled a renewed focus on, it's starting to really become a pretty major issue here. So the goal of today's meeting is to make sure that that isn't you, and that during your next TJC inspection, you're comfortably prepared to pass with flying colors and you don't get blindsided by anything at all. So to that end, we'll be covering a few things today, kind of in 2 sections. The first section is going to focus on emergency lighting and everything you need to know to avoid getting a deficiency. We'll be kicking it off by doing just a quick overview of the CMS codes, which testing and record keeping requirements they have, which codes you'll need to be able to identify and be familiar with, especially when it comes to unit equipment. Then we'll cover what you should expect during an inspection, some of the tricks that might land you a deficiency unintentionally, some of the other things that they'll be looking for. And then we'll be moving on to causes of failures and deficiencies. Like, what's really behind this? And finally, how can you preempt those at their source? Like, what sort of things and steps can you do to make sure that this isn't a problem? And after that, we'll be kicking it over to Sabina, who will be sharing, how she's managed to really solve a lot of these problems that a lot of you guys are facing using some new innovative technologies. Its impact, its outlining, its installation procedure, and kind of her new status quo. So starting from the top, it's EC 020507. That's really the critical code here that governs emergency lighting and power supplies. And really in particular, when it comes to unit equipment, it's going to be EP1 and EP2 that set the standards for what you should be looking out for. EP1 focuses on these functional tests. And that is that every month for 30 seconds, these lights need to be engaged. They need to turn on. You need to make sure that they turn on, that they're working, they're plugged in, they can provide illumination. And then you need to make sure to record those results and before moving on to the next one. EP2 is for an annual test. This is a discharge test. And the idea here isn't just to make sure that the lights work, but that they can provide emergency power during a disaster for at least 90 minutes to give everyone enough time to get out of the building without accidentally falling down the stairs and breaking their neck, or getting lost and never making it out of the building in the first place. And just like EP1, these annual tests need to be recorded. So really zooming in on unit equipment, what these look like is there's either a little test button on the light, which can be activated by hand, or a stick if they're high up. And pressing that button turns the unit equipment on for about however long you're holding it. There are other variations of this that are self-testing, where they'll run these tests and communicate through blinking LEDs, but they're relatively uncommon and come with their own manual alarms. So as far as you need to know, 90 minutes, once a year, this test needs to be done, which is challenging when often the only thing you have is a switch, and monthly for 30 seconds. Now, an alternative way of doing this is if you're lucky enough to have all of your lights on a dedicated emergency circuit, you can flip a breaker, just make sure to flip it back on, because if the lights discharge completely and they're not charging, they're no good to you during an emergency. The other half of this is that you really do need to record what the results of these tests are. And at the very minimum, you have to note the location, the date, the results of the test, and who it was inspected by. We recommend you keep these for 3 years, but really the litmus test here is you need to be able to point to any light in your building and say when it was tested, by who, and what the result was. It's not enough to just say all of my lights were tested on this day, but it has to be that type, that light at that day. And we'll come back to why this is so important in just a little bit. So what to expect during an inspection, and this is really the how they gotcha kind of thing. During the walkthrough, inspectors are going to be looking for both exit sign failures and emergency lighting failures. For an exit sign, there's kind of the big three things that they're going to be looking for obstructions. Is the visual line of sight to this exit sign somehow blocked, either because something's in front of it, someone turned it the wrong way, a ceiling tile has fallen in front, something like that. They're also going to be looking for obvious signs of damage and to see if they're non-lit. For unit equipment, it's much the same. Obviously, if it's hanging off the wall by a thread, the light's not in good shape to perform its duties. The second thing they're going to be doing are spot tests, where they're going to be going and manually running those tests themselves by clicking the test button. And really, they're checking for two things. One, does this unit turn on? Is it like basically functioning? And two, is it bright enough? Because it's not actually a binary thing here. If the light turns on, but it's not providing sufficient illumination, that's still a failure. But it's not enough that your lights just work. Even if they walk through your entire building, test every single light, do 100% spot inspections, everything passes, you can still get a deficiency if you're not keeping your records up to scratch. In particular, what they're really looking for, besides the basic identifying information for the lamp and the test, is that you close the loop when you find a problem. I mean, it's really only a matter of time before one of these lights fails on you. It would be concerning if they didn't, and I'll touch on that in just a bit. But what happens next is what's really important. When you have an error in your reports or a failure in your reports, is there a work order to show that it was repaired? Was that work order closed out? How is that attached to that failing test? So closing the loop here is really critical, because if you have a failing test and you've documented it, but you don't document the repair, they can hit you for that pretty easily as well. So some of the old school systems here are, printing out a work order, printing out the completion, stapling it to a report that has a failing test, that sort of stuff. Critical that you do close the loop. Also, trying to hit that 48-hour failure identified to failure repaired window is really recommended. And the second thing is that when it comes to records, no problems are a problem. If you have a couple office buildings, 300-400 lights, and for the last year, there has not been a single failure, or for the last 2 years, there's not been anything wrong with any of your lights, that's going to get really suspicious. And inspectors are going to take a much closer look. They're going to do more spot inspections, pay a little bit more attention during their walkthrough, maybe look through more records, because it signals that maybe this is not a completely honest report and test record. Which brings us to the next stage here, right? The number one cause of emergency light deficiencies is in fact human error. The equipment here is fairly straightforward. It's very simple. There's not too much that can go wrong with it. And generally, if something goes wrong, the problem is that it wasn't identified and repaired in a timely and effective way. So kind of the big three root causes here are pencil whipping reports, which is kind of a harsh way to say it, but frankly, not testing when you should be, and then lying about testing on your records. Some questions you should really be asking yourself are, do I trust the person who's testing these? Both from an honesty perspective, like, do I know they're not going to take an extra long lunch and just say that they did the test? And also from a competency perspective. If you're relying on nurses to test outpatient buildings, as lots of facility managers do, are they able to kind of identify, is that light bright enough? Are they doing these tests the way they should be? Are they taking records the way they ought to be? Or are they distracted? Sometimes just not knowing better is the sort of things that leads to these problems. And the second thing is, do you have a way to verify? If you are trusting these people, how do you double check? Are you doing spot inspections from time to time? Are you doing your own walkthroughs? Are you reviewing the reports? Because if you're getting pristine reports from a building for years and years on end, it probably means that the person there is taking liberties with how often and regularly they test. The second thing is poor record keeping. Sometimes it's as simple as, if you only have paper records and you don't have duplicates, misplacing a binder will get you in hot water. Or, as mentioned before, not closing out work orders, not tracking those work orders or repairs, or not closing them out in a sufficient enough time window. Remember, like the litmus test here is that particular light was tested on that day by that person, and this is the result, is what they're looking for here. And this is when keeping things like serial numbers or unique identifiers on your equipment is really critical. It really helps you kind of tick and tie every test to every light as you move forward. And the final cause of failure caused by human error is just good faith mistakes, right? These buildings are living things. Sometimes the lights get moved during renovations, they get broken. Sometimes if you have a lot of lights in a building, they just get missed. And this is normal. It's really just a matter of time if you're relying on manual testing for this to happen. But the critical thing here is that we can prepare for it and we can mitigate this by being really careful about the procedures and methodologies we set up. So making sure that serial numbers, for example, or unique identifier numbers are there so that someone doesn't accidentally miss a light. Making sure that our records are being reviewed, someone has some oversight here. And critically, if you do get a failure, making sure during an inspection, making sure you have someone on your staff on standby who can quickly respond to that and fix it before the inspector leaves will mitigate the harm of that deficiency, at least to some extent. But long story short, the only way to really solve this problem at its source is to take the human out of the equation. When it comes to human error, it's really that first word, the human part, that's really difficult. And there are lots of solutions that are available right now, like one that we make that performs testing automatically. The idea is that these smart lights replace existing fixtures, they perform all of the testing record keeping requirements automatically, report that to an online system, in some cases like ours, without using your internet. And then the user has the advantage of digital records that they can keep so they're not managing them, and alerts when things go wrong so they don't have to send one of their guys out and trust that he's doing hundreds, if not thousands of light tests every month. So the next part of this is a live case study with someone who did just that. Sabina is the construction controller and property manager for Atlantic Health, based out of Morristown, New Jersey. As a quick introduction, Atlantic Health System serves Northern New Jersey. Sabina is responsible for over 400 offsite buildings, and the system has 5 hospitals as well, and over 18,000 employees. So Sabina, I'll kick it off to you to kind of tell us what life was like, when you were still testing lights manually.
Hello, everybody. My name is Sabina Serta, and again, I'm the construction controller. In addition to that, I, from a facility standpoint, manage our offsite buildings, about 400, and we keep on building them. And they consist basically of either ambulatory care centers, physician practices, warehouses, central labs, central administrative areas. The sites that we're most concerned about are the ones that are hospital-based. Those would be the ones that would get picked by the Joint Commission. And since we have 5 hospitals, we typically know when the Joint Commission is coming for the certain areas. So if it's the Morristown, it would be any offsite associated with Morristown Medical Center in that area. It's chosen to be for that site. So right now, our first rollout with Hexmoto is at Bedminster, and that's offsite down in Bedminster, New Jersey. We just finished construction. We were able to get the fixtures in at the end of construction. We had our TCO, and now that we're almost fully occupied over there, we've been able to install the system, which is great, because over the years I've had this on my head, like something's going to happen. We're going to get caught with not having the right reports. We can't rely on our on-site staff, as Chris mentioned. They won't even put salt out on the soup if there's ice or cold. So we have to do it from our facilities department. Problem is we don't have enough people on staff to send people out to the sites to perform this testing. So right now we've hired a handyman services that we use for other things besides the testing of the lights. And as Chris mentioned, that requires getting access into the site, which often they get turned away, even though they know they're coming. It requires the human touching the fixtures, testing the fixtures, and relying on reports, hoping that they got all the fixtures, the exit signs, and the battery packs. What this does is at that time for the once a month test, we know, but as Chris mentioned, we don't know from once a month to the next month or for the yearly 90-minute if a fixture has failed. With automated services that they provide, now we know. And it is, like I said, unreliable and definitely expensive because we have a third party that we have to pay to do the coordination of all the testing.
So Sabina, can you tell us a little bit like about what your setup process was like, what your experience with getting, this system in your building was like?
Yeah, what was great about this is they provide all of the fixtures, and they're pretty much a swap out. So the ones that we did at Bridgewater that were already mounted, they pretty much fit right in the same for the wall packs, same exact area. There's no painting or any kind of patching required. So it's a swap out right there, and same thing with the exit signs. What was amazing is, and I did it myself. The device that they used for the transmission, and Chris, can you get into that a little bit more? We don't have to involve our IT, which is a nightmare. If anyone works in the hospital system, you know that you add anything to IT, it's just a nightmare. So they have a module that you pretty much just plug in the wall, and I could see all the devices going from red to green. And that was there's a 2-level site, and only one unit that was centrally installed was able to activate all these fixtures. You go on the floor plans, we tag them, which has to be recorded by the Joint Commission to a tag for whatever fixture it is, where it is. They put it on the blueprint. They even have to and it's all right there. It's all internet based again, and it's no IT involved, which is great for us.
Yeah, as Sabina mentioned, the way this works is that our lights speak to a gateway, and then that gateway uses a cellular connection, just like your phone does, to talk to the internet. So at no point are we using your Wi-Fi or your Ethernet or anything like that. As you can attest, you literally just plug a box the size of a sandwich into the wall, and everything connects and communicates automatically. And one of these boxes will cover, about 300,000 square feet of indoor space.
Yeah, and that's really the amazing part. You have to see it to believe it. I didn't believe it, but yeah, now I know. And anyone I explain this to, they're like, "No way." There's 1,000 questions. I'm like, just trust me. So it's a great program.
So to give you a little bit idea of what Sabina's process is like right now, all of lights in these buildings are running their tests automatically on a schedule that she set and identified. So I remember at the beginning, there was a specific, date you wanted your annual tests to run, like on a certain month or a certain time of day. You don't want them on when people are in the building, where they might start freaking out and calling you.
Yes, and again, the recording is great. We have to have we do a certain template. Someone in my office takes care of all these manuals because the Joint Commission, for some reason, loves hard copies. We have millions of manuals for all this testing, this testing, and everything else that we need to meet for the Joint Commission. And it pretty much marks, again, the device number, the location, when the tests were performed, if there was a failure that we repaired it, and when we show the R1 site, you can see it's very easy to see if a device if it failed and if it was fixed. So,
and just
headache
you guys a quick preview of that. So this is actually the platform that we built out for Sabina. And this is what she was referencing. You can see all 248 of the fixtures in this one building responding. 247 are in compliance. 1 is out of compliance. You can actually click through the interactive floor map she mentioned, where when we click on the light that's not working, we can see where it lives, which building it's in, which room in that building, it's an emergency light or an exit sign, who owns it, who's in charge of it. And critically, if we click on the test result, we can see it's not passing because the battery's dead.
And Chris, why don't you explain, I think what's interesting too is where you can see where the battery is, the different values. You go back to that other slide.
Absolutely. So I'll pull that up for you.
Which you definitely can't tell if you're doing manual testing.
Yeah. So we're not only giving you a thumbs up or a thumbs down, we're actually diagnosing the problem. As you can see here, the result of this test is the battery is not charging, and it's asking you to check the battery to create that fixture. And the way we know that is we have the values of the currents, the battery starting and ending voltage, what those levels need to be in order to be meeting TJC requirements. And in this case, it's not at 3.5 volts, it's at pretty much nothing because it's dead. So this light just needs to be replaced with a better battery and it's back up and running.
And again, we're focusing right now on our sites that can be checked by the Joint Commission, but we did have an incident on last Joint Commission run for, I believe it was Overlook Medical Center. And they asked for reporting on a physical therapy site, one part of it that doesn't normally get checked by the Joint Commission. So although we're focusing on our inventory hospital-based pay sites now, we're going to be focusing on really all of our sites. It's a big rollout. I mean, there's 400 different sites. These 4 sites that we're starting with right now are about 180,000 square feet combined. One of them is 90,000. So we're going to start with the big ones, and then as we go ahead on constructing or taking over new sites, even if they're small, we're going to roll out the program so that we even have the small ones. They're actually harder to get to in regards to manual.
And also, as mentioned, you can see a copy of one of her reports right here. This one's from March for Bridgewater. And it's the sort of thing you'd expect.
Yeah, this is great.
A summary at the top, the Joint Commission code outlining what automated testing needs to do, the NFPA code that it references down here, and then just the same sort of matrix that that Sabina was doing on her own previously, with building, light code, results, test state, test type, even the raw data and the type of light it is.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing. I wish I could snap my fingers and have it everywhere.
Yep. And just talking a little bit about how this has helped.
It helps me sleep at night.
Let's get this going again. There we go. Yep. So yeah, I would just love to hear about what are the big takeaways from having this sort of system in place?
Yeah, pretty much. At least on the buildings that we're implementing this on, we don't have to worry about any of the reporting. We know we're up to date. We know what's accurate. Again, we're saving money on third-party managing of these facilities, and we're again moving forward and trying to get as many as we can done. We pay the devices, even if they do fail. These guys will give us another device to replace it. It's pretty smooth in general.
Yeah, amazing. Yeah, as Sabina mentioned, that part of the program is, in addition to giving the units away for free, we also provide free replacement parts if something breaks. So it's not just getting rid of the headache of testing, but also the headache of repairing.
Yeah.
So I think that's pretty much everything we had scheduled for today. I'd love to open it up to questions. I see that we have one already in chat. So let's see if we can do that over here.
That's a great question, the first one, because that's what I said. How do they handle the dead zones? They handle it. Cool. I don't know how. That's you guys.
So the cool thing here, and I'll actually turn this over to Utkarsh. Utkarsh, the question is, how does this handle any Wi-Fi dead zones?
Yeah. So one key thing to indicate here is that the communication between the individual lights and the gateway doesn't actually happen over Wi-Fi. One of the problems with using a Wi-Fi system is that you need something of the scale of an IT team in order to manage it, and that leads to all of the problems that you guys have, with your IT teams. And so what we do instead is we use a low frequency radio system in order to have all the lights communicate. And so that means that they can communicate with that central gateway without, they get much better range, and they can communicate without you having to, input in a username or a password or things like that. All of the lights actually come ready built with, the correct, all of the correct, codes and keys so they can communicate out of the box. In terms of hack issues or bad actors, the system we use actually comes with end-to-end encryption. And so, your emergency light data is definitely safe in that sense, because one is that we're completely disconnected from your main hospital network. So, even if something went wrong, it wouldn't affect any of your other systems. And the individual system itself is end-to-end encrypted, and so there's no risk of bad passwords or things like that because everything is built in from the beginning.
Yep. And just to kind of reiterate here, the answer is we don't use Wi-Fi. We don't use your Wi-Fi at all, right? It's a completely air-gapped system. There's no touching. So you don't have to worry about anything bad happening and propagating through your system because we're not on your network. We use a really low frequency radio, which has the advantage of a really amazing range, especially compared to Wi-Fi, without us ever really needing to touch yours. Also, guys, feel free to to ask questions live. Just unmute yourself. You don't need to send it through the chat. But yeah, Tom, so Tom asks, did I see one of your slides that there's no upfront cost? Yeah, that's absolutely correct. So with Sabina, we gave her all of the lights she needed for free. All she did was let us know the quantities and we shipped them over. And then we charge per month a couple bucks to do the testing, cover the cost of the units, and also provide free replacement parts and new fixtures if anything goes wrong. So there is really no upfront cost to the system. Bethane, I see, is asking, is there any wiring needed within the building, such as a control panel? And the answer is no. This is a completely wireless system. So all you have to do is connect everything to power, and it does the rest. They talk wirelessly throughout your building. And again, each one of those gateways, I have one right here. You can see it's about the size of a sandwich. Will cover about 300,000 square feet of indoor space. So even if you have multiple stories, like Sabina had, we can get to pretty much every nook and cranny. And again, like if you guys have any questions, either for us or about Sabina, for Sabina and her experience, feel free to just ask live.
Chris, there's another question from John.
What is the expected life of the batteries? Cool, excellent question. So these fixtures are LED fixtures, and they also come with NiCad batteries. These batteries will last about 6 to 7 years. And then if they go bad, we provide you new ones for free. So that's that. As far as the life expectancy of the LEDs go, which is a common follow-up question, they'll last about 50,000 hours. And considering these lights are on for only about an hour and a half, maybe an hour and 40 minutes a year, you can see like they're fine. They're going to outlast both of us. The plastic will fall apart before the lamps go bad. Cool.
Oh, and they come in red and they come in green.
Yeah.
Atlantic Health, we like to use green exit signs. And
yes,
everything's made up in your warehouse in Rhode Island, which is nice too.
Yep. So it's all put together in Rhode Island. As Sabina mentioned, we have a whole line. So we do emergency lights, exit signs in both colors, and combo units. And our goal here is to kind of expand beyond just emergency lighting to cover a whole swath of, TJC required products. We'll be releasing smart room pressure sensors in just about a couple months. So keep your eyes peeled for that.
For negative air, if anyone has to deal with that. COVID.
Amazing. So we'll give it another minute just in case there's any other questions here. Of course. All right. Well, Ed first, do you have any parting remarks for the people who are joining us today?
I just want to really thank Sabina for coming on and sharing her experiences. It's really great to hear firsthand how the whole setup process was for her.
Yep. Something we haven't touched on is this is actually Utkarsh's and our company. We've been around 4 years. We're a team of about 10 now, and really take a lot of pride in this. So we always appreciate having a happy customer like Sabina. It really means that the last few years of our life have been put to good work.
Yeah, and I'll just say that Chris, he called during the COVID, and he was very persistent. I mean, not annoying at all, but persistent. And finally, I looked at it and I said, "Wow, this thing's pretty cool, but too good to be true." And then, we did it, and I'm like, "Wow, it's really an amazing product." These guys are pretty smart. I have to say that.
Thanks, really appreciate it. It's been a pleasure. All right, what we'll do is we'll follow up with a copy of these slides for your guys' reference. And other than that, have a wonderful Tuesday and rest of the week. Enjoy the weather while it lasts.
Okay, thank you, Christopher.
My pleasure. Thank you, Mark.
Bye now.
Bye.
Thanks, Chris.
Thank you.